Okay. Okay, so this is a very interesting Sicha. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to open up the Chumash to chapter 15, and we're going to read a few psukim just to get an idea of what our topic is today. Okay, so if you start, so we're in Parshas Re'eh, and we're talking about a master who buys a slave. So I'm starting to read from Pasuk Yud Beis, from the 12th Pasuk. Ki yimachar lecha achicha ha'ivri, if there be sold to you, your brother, a Hebrew man, ay ha'ivriya, or a Hebrew woman, va'avad chashesh shanim, you shall serve him for 6 years. He shall serve you for 6 years. Uvashana shvius, and on the 7th year, shachenu chafshi, you shall let him go free, me'imach, from you. V'chi sishalchenu chafshi, and when you let him go free, me'imach, from you, lo sishalchenu rekam, you shall not let him go empty-handed. Ta'anik loi, you shall furnish him liberally. And this is the mitzvah that we're learning today. It's called the mitzvah of ha'anaka, which means that if a master is letting his servant go after 6 years of working for him, he should not let him go empty-handed, but rather he should give him presents. What type of presents should he give him? Mitzaincha, from your flock, umigarnecha, from your threshing floor, umikavecha, and from your wine press. Asher beirachacha Hashem alekacha, of that which Hashem has blessed you. Titan loi, you shall give to him. So basically, what kind of gifts should you give your slave that you're letting him go after 6 years? It's things that could multiply. For example, if you give him animals, the animals could multiply, and then there's even more animals. Or things that grow, like it says, from your threshing floor and from your wine press. If you give him vines that he could plant, and then they will multiply, this is a very good gift to give, because every time this former slave will go outside to his vineyard, or every time he goes to where his animals are and he sees more animals, he'll always remember his master, and he'll remember the appreciation that his master had for him.
Where the hell are they?
He's gonna constantly he's gonna constantly see in front of him the gifts that he received. Okay. So basically, to summarize, what we're saying is we have in this week's parsha, we have the mitzvah called ha'anaka. If you owned a slave, a Jewish slave, whether it be male or female, after 6 years you let them go, and you can't let them go empty-handed. You have to give them gifts that could multiply. For example, animals or things that grow. And things that multiply. This is the things that Hashem blessed you with, and it's called a gift of a bracha, something that could multiply. Then comes our pasuk that we're going to focus on today. So it's chapter 15, verse 15. V'zacharta ki eved ha'isa, remember that you were a slave, a servant, be'eretz Mitzrayim, the land of Egypt. V'yaftecha Hashem alekecha, and Hashem redeemed you. Al kain, therefore, anochi mitzavcha, I am commanding you as a davar hazeh, this thing, hayom, today. So this pasuk is a continuation of this mitzvah, and he's saying, giving you the reason. Why is it that you should give hanaka, you should give presents to your slave? Because I took you out of Egypt, I redeemed you, and therefore I'm commanding you about this thing. So the question that we have is, if this verse is talking about hanaka, is talking about hanaka, the presents that a master should give his servant, how come in this pasuk it doesn't mention the gift that Hashem gifts that Hashem gave us when he took us out of Egypt, which are, number one, Hashem instructed the Yidden that they should go and they should ask their neighbors for vessels of silver, of gold, and garments. So that's one time that Hashem gave them, Hashem compensated them with gifts. And also when the Yidden came to the splitting of the sea, the Egyptians, they came to chase the Jews with their chariots and with their horses, and their horses were adorned with gold, silver, and diamonds. And after the miracle of the splitting of the sea, Hashem washed up to the shore all these horses, all the dead horses, and all their, maybe not the horses, but for sure the jewelry and the diamonds and the gold and the silver, and the Yidden collected it, and that was their presents, that was their ha'anaka, the gift that you give to a slave after he finishes the time that he's working for you. So how come in this pasuk it doesn't mention the ha'anaka, the gift that Hashem gave us when he took us out of Egypt? It just says, remember that you were slaves in Egypt and Hashem redeemed you. Therefore, I'm commanding you on this about this on this day, and it does not mention the gifts that Hashem gave us. So that's the question that we have. Okay, so we have the Sifri. The Sifri explains, which actually is also in Rashi. If you look at Rashi 15, it says as follows: and you should remember that you were a slave. V'hanakti, and I gave you presents. V'shanisilach, and I gave you double presents. I gave you a second time. Mibizas Mitzrayim, I gave you the spoils of Egypt, which is what the Jews asked their neighbors for. Bizas hayam, and also the spoils of the sea. Af atahanek, you too should give presents, ushnelai, and give double. So this is what Rashi says, and the Sifri also expands on this even more, and compares the spoils that we got in Egypt to we came out of Egypt, and Egypt was like this filthy place spiritually, and we're compared to a dove with silver wings, shining silver wings from the silver and from the silver and the booty that we got from when we left Egypt. And then on top of that, getting the spoils from the sea, that's compared to the wings of the bird being coated in gold with silver specks on it, and that refers to all the booty that we got in Egypt and by the sea. Okay, so now we have a question. If you want to take a piece of paper and make a chart, it might be helpful. And what I would make 3 columns for this chart. And the first column is, what is the halachos of ha'anaka? What is the halachos regarding the master that has to give presents to his former slave? There's 3 points. Number 1, which we discussed, is that the items that he gives has to be items that are blessed, things that could multiply, like sheep or animals, and from the granaries and from the vineyards. So number 1 is what you're supposed to give. Number 2, when does the halachas of Hanaka apply? Only when the master is a Jew. And number 3, the third point in halacha is that the Hanaka has to come from the master. The whole concept of Hanaka, where are we learning it from? Next column, if you're making a chart, the next column would be Egypt. We're learning it from our exodus from Egypt. However, it doesn't seem to match up, because the halacha states that the ha'anaka, the gifts, have to be things that could multiply, and yet the gifts that the Yidden received when they left Egypt and by the sea are not things that could multiply. Gold, silver, diamonds, clothes are not things that are generally given as Hanaka. Number two, with regards to Hanaka, the master has to be a Jew. In the case of Egypt, the Pari was not Jewish. The Egyptians were not Jewish. So that's a second point that is not similar to the halacha. And thirdly, with regards to Hanaka, the gift has to come from the master. Yet we find when we're talking about the Jews going out of Egypt and getting these gifts, it did not, although it technically came from the Egyptians, at least when they left Egypt, but the idea and the instruction came from Hashem. Hashem was the one that we attribute these gifts, that Hashem is the one that gave them the gifts, because Hashem is the one that instructed them to go to their neighbors, and Hashem arranged that they should have all these gifts. So in the three halachic points of how to fulfill the mitzvah of Hanaka, we find that where you learn it from, which is the exodus of Egypt, it does not line up, it does not match up to the halacha exactly. Okay, so the 3 points are what was given, who the master is, and who the gift comes from. Before we answer this, the Rebbe's father, his name was Reb Levi Yitzchak Schneerson. He was a big Kabbalist, and he wrote a Reshima, he wrote notes about this topic. And the Rebbe very much honored his father, and the Reb Levik's yahrzeit was Chaf Av, which is this past Shabbos. So especially when it came to the yahrzeit of Reb Levik, of his father, the Rebbe would very often teach teachings of his father at this time. So Reb Levik, the Rebbe's father, brings another example in Torah where we see this concept of Hanaka, of someone who is a slave and gets presents, and it matches up with what we see, what we read about the Exodus from Egypt. And so it's another example, and we're going to be left with the same problem. Is that also this example that Rabbi Levi is going to bring matches up very well with the Exodus from Egypt, but not so much, has the same problems as the halacha of Hanaka, that it doesn't match up with the halachas exactly. So what's the example that Rabbi Levi brings? Where do we see in Torah an example of a slave that comes out of slavery and gets gifts? So if you want, you could unmute. Otherwise, I'll tell you. I'm sure you all know. The answer would be Yosef Hatzadik. Yosef was sold for 20 pieces of silver to Potiphar. And then he gets thrown into jail. And then he interprets dreams for the butler and the baker. Then Pare has dreams, and the butler remembers that Yosef in the jail. Yosef is brought out. Yosef interprets the dreams, and he ends up becoming the viceroy of Egypt, the second in command. Okay, so what are the gifts? Okay, so what are the gifts that Yosef receives? So number one, from Pare, he receives the signet ring. He receives a golden chain, and he receives linen garments. And very interesting, the way to say golden chain in Hebrew is revid zahav. That's how you say a golden chain. The numerical equivalence of revid zahav is 220. And the shayresh of the word ha'anaka, which means the gifts that you give to a slave that's free from slavery is Ayin Nun Kuf, which is also 220. So here we see that the Revid Hazav, the golden chain, is a proof that was considered to be ha'anaka. It was considered to be a gift after he was redeemed from his slavery. Then that's what he got from Parai. Then he got from his former boss, from Potiphar, he got Asnas to be his wife. Asnas was Potiphar's daughter, and he married Asnas. And thirdly, the most primary gift that he got, the most important gift that he got, the most important ha'anaka was from Hashem. What was it? It was that an angel came and taught him, Malach Gavriel came and taught him 70 languages. What happened? When Parai wanted to appoint Yosef to be the second to the king, the other officers were very jealous, and they said, how could you take this Jew boy, this slave, who was sold for 20 silver coins, and make him to be our ruler? So Parai said, he's not just a Jewish slave, but I sense that that he comes from royalty. So the other officer says, well, if he comes from royalty, then the proof for that, or the proof of that, someone who's in the royal family would have to know the 70 languages. So Hashem sent an angel to teach him the 70 languages, and that is a gift of ha'anaka that he received from Hashem after his slavery. And if you look in the Chumash, when it says that Asnas was Potiphar's wife, that Asnas was Potiphar's daughter, and Yosef received her hand in marriage. It doesn't just say Potiphar in the Chumash, but it says Potiphera. And Potiphera, the last letter is an ayin. Ayin is numerical equivalence of 70, which is an allusion to the 70 languages that the angel taught Yosef. But here again, it's true that marrying Asnas, through marriage you have children, and children multiply. But if you look at the stuff that Yosef got, it's not the regular stuff. It's not the regular things that halacha demands that should be given as a gift of ha'anaka. Halacha says you should give things like animals and things that grow. Yet we find in Mitzrayim what the Jews were given was gold, silver, money, diamonds, garments. And we find that with Yosef, what he was given was ring, golden chain, linen garments, languages, and a wife. So it does not match up. It doesn't match up. Halacha says the present should be animals and things that grow. Yet we find that both by Mitzrayim and by Yosef, the presents were not the usual things that the Torah, the halacha, specifies for the gifts. So that's one question. That's one point that we're trying to understand. Also with Yosef, the gifts that he got, he got Asnas from Potiphar. Some say that he didn't get Asnas from Potiphar, but rather Parai is the one that gave Asnas to Yosef. But in any case, the main gift was the languages. And who did that come from? That came from Hashem, not from the master. And also, according to halacha, the whole entire thing of Hanaka only applies when the master is a Jew, and Potiphar wasn't a Jew. So why are these gifts called Hanaka? Why are these gifts called Hanaka when the whole basis of Hanaka is that the master has to be a Jew and that has to come from a master? And here, the master was not a Jew, and it primarily comes from Hashem, both with regards to Mitzrayim and both regards to Yosef. Okay, so I'm just going to catch up with the poem, and then we'll continue. Okay, the poem I posted on the WhatsApp, if you're able to open it. Okay, in Parshas Re'eh, the mitzvah of ha'anaka is written. When a master sets his servant free, parting gifts must be given. Only when the master is a Jew does the mitzvah apply. The master must give a gift that grows or animals that multiply. The source of this mitzvah, says the Sifri, is that Hashem took us out of Egyptian slavery. Hashem instructed that every Jew should borrow gold, silver, and garments from their neighbor. And at the sea, Yidden collected gold, silver, and diamonds that were washed up from the water. Another example is brought by Reb Leivik, the Rebbe's father. Yosef received Hanaka when he was freed and became the second to the ruler. Hashem gave him Hanaka by sending Malach Gavriel to teach him languages 70. Para gave him a signet ring, gold chain, and garments, and Potiphar gave him Asnas to marry. The question that comes to mind is that we find that the reasons for the mitzvah of Hanaka don't exactly follow the specific details of the halacha. So the whole place where we learn Hanaka from is from Mitzrayim and from Yosef, yet we find that the specifications don't match up. When it comes to halacha, the owner has to be Jewish, it has to come from the owner, and the gifts have to be animals or things that grow. With regards to Mitzrayim and to Yosef, the gifts were not the animals, they were not things that would grow, the master was not Jewish, and the gifts primarily came from Hashem and not from the master. Okay, so now we're going to start answering. So the answer is that we have, when we're talking about the mitzvah of Hanaka, there are two perspectives. One perspective is the perspective of the master, and the other perspective is the perspective of the former slave. So all these halachos that the Torah teaches us with regards to Hanaka, what the gifts have to be and who has to give it, and that it has to be a Jewish master. All those things all apply and all are geared to and are focused on the master. The master has to be Jewish. The gift has to come from the master, and the master has to know what kind of gifts to give. But there's another whole entire perspective, and that is the perspective of the freed slave. So just because the slave is freed doesn't mean that he has the tools, and doesn't mean that he actually feels free. For example, after the Holocaust, yes, the camps, the Jews were liberated from the camps, but they didn't have their enemy threatening to kill them at any second. But they didn't have proper food and proper clothing right away, and it took time for them to feel that freedom. So what Torah is it's amazing that Torah is very in tune to our feelings. It's not just enough to be let go, to be set free, but the Torah is concerned with and cares about the person's feelings. The former slave, how does he feel? Does he truly feel completely free? Or is he just, let go technically, but if he has no resources and no way to start his life again, how is he truly free? So the Hanaka is not just a cherry on the top, but rather the Hanaka, the gift that the former slave receives, is very much a part of becoming free, because without it, it's part of the process of the freedom. Without it, if you just let him free and he doesn't have one penny to his name, then he's not truly free, because he has nothing. So the Hanaka is extremely important, and it is actually a part of the freedom. In order for the person to feel free, he has to have as many gifts as possible. He has to have tools or money or whatever it is to be able to stand on his 2 feet, to be able to start his life again. So it's true. So yes, we learn Hanukkah from Egypt and from Yosef. Why is that? Because from the perspective, so the first few psukim are all talking about the perspective of the master. What are the master's dry minimum obligations? But then, and it says that the minimum amount of that he has to give, that his gifts that he's gifting, the minimum has to be 30 slaim. That is the minimum of a gift that the master has to give. However, then we have our pasuk, and our pasuk comes and says it's not enough. It's not enough to just give what the master is obligated to give. But remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and Hashem freed you, and all the tremendous things that Hashem gave to you. And in this pasuk, in pasuk 15, it does not tell you exactly what Hashem gave you, the booty from Egypt and the booty by the sea. But because the point that he's trying to make is that whatever you gave, please don't just give, but give double and give with an open hand. Because we have to focus on the perspective of the slave, on his feelings. And just because you let him go, and if you gave him the minimal gift, that doesn't necessarily make him feel completely free. But the more he is given, the more gifts you give him again and double and with an open hand, that is going to actually make him truly feel free and truly be able to start his life again. And that is the new thing that pasuk, the 15th pasuk, is teaching us, is that we should go above and beyond when in the gift giving. So until you're sure that the slave feels truly free because he's able to stand on his 2 feet, because he has the resources to start his life again, and therefore it doesn't matter what the gift is. Gold, silver, diamonds, garments. It doesn't have to be just animals or things that grow, because money is very good for the slave to feel that he could start his life again. And that's why whether it be the 70 languages or the gold chain or the ring or the wife, all those are all great from the slave's perspective, and therefore it is not a contradiction, because when we're talking about the feelings of the former slave, all these things are all wonderful, are all great benefits for him, are all part of the process of him feeling completely free, and therefore we're learning a second level of what it means, Hanukkah, from Egypt and from Yosef. The first level of Hanukkah is that it has to be an animal and it has to be things that grow. Why? So that because those things, yes, they give the former slave confidence and gives him the ability and tools to start his life again. But additionally, a main factor here is that when he sees the animals, when he sees the fruits that are growing, then he automatically remembers the appreciation of his master. So those are things that will help him remember his master, and therefore this is what his master has to give him. But on top of that, don't suffice there. The master should not suffice there, but rather there's a whole nother level of more and more things. Anything you want, you could give to anything: gold, silver, money, diamonds, a wife, anything. Languages Hashem gives, but anything that you could give is encouraged, because that's another whole level. It's not just about the master fulfilling his obligation, but it's about the slave feeling completely free and having the tools and the resources to restart his life. And also this is why if you're focusing on the perspective of the slave doesn't care who he gets the gifts from, if it's from his master, if it's someone else, if it's from directly from Hashem. Because the main thing is that he should feel completely free, and therefore, whether it be with regards to Mitzrayim or whether it be regards to Yosef, the gifts doesn't have to come from a Jewish master or from the master altogether. It could come straight from Hashem, because it's not about, we're looking at it through the lens, through the perspective of the former slave, and the main thing is that the former slave should feel completely free, and therefore it doesn't matter what the gift is. It doesn't have to be animals and things that grow. It could be other things as well, and it doesn't matter who he gets it from. The main thing is that he should feel completely free. So up until here is the nigla, the revealed part of Torah, the nigla discussion about the mitzvah of Hanukkah and the questions that we asked, and now we can understand. Why bringing the example of Egypt, and later bringing the example of Yosef, how it helps us understand the depth of this mitzvah of Hanukkah, and brings it to a whole new level, not just from the perspective of the adain, of the master, but from the perspective of the slave, that he should actually feel completely free. Okay, I'm going to catch up with the poem, and then we're going to go to the Kabbalah. The explanation is that there are two perspectives to consider: the perspective of the servant and the perspective of the master. The halachas of Hanukkah are what the Jewish master is required to give. His gifts are a reminder of his appreciation, and since they multiply, they help the person live. But in order for the servant to start his life anew, he needs to feel completely free, which is what the gifts help him do. To the servant, it doesn't matter as much who the gifts are from or what they are. The more he has, the more he feels that he can succeed and go far. Okay. It says two, but it should be a few. There are a few psukim that speak about Hanukkah in our parsha. The first few tell us the obligation of the master and the minimum amount of the Hanukkah. From the next pasuk, from pasuk 15, we learn that we should follow Hashem's example and do more. We should give double Hanukkah with an open hand until the servant feels totally free for sure. For Yosef, the Hanukkah that was the best was the knowledge of the 70 languages, so that his rulership no one could contest. Asnas was the daughter of his previous master. Marrying her and receiving Paro's gifts also made him feel freer. For him to marry the daughter of his former boss makes him feel very free, because now not only is he not a slave, but now he becomes the son-in-law. So it helps him become free. That's why it was considered to be part of the Hanukkah. Okay, up until here is the Nigla discussion. Now we're going to take it a step further, and we're going to understand Kabbalistically what this means. Okay, so in Torah, so here is a discussion about the Eved Ivri, the Jewish slave. But there's also a concept of an Eved Knani, a non-Jewish slave. And we're going to discuss in our service of Hashem what is what is an Eved Knani represent? What does an Eved Ivri represent? What is our mission, etc. Okay, so the Eved Knani, the Gentile servant, he serves his master. He feels forced to serve his master. He doesn't want to, but he's just afraid of his master, and therefore he serves him. He serves him with Kabbalas Ol. There's a yoke on him, and that's why he's forced to serve his master. In our Avodas Hashem, what does this represent? This represents a Jew who has bittul. He's completely surrendered to Hashem. He serves Hashem because he feels forced to, and he goes against his will, or he puts his will aside, It's not about him. It's not about his feelings. He doesn't want to he doesn't want to serve, but he forces himself and to serve Hashem. That is an Eved Knani. Seemingly, that is seemingly that's a lower level, because he's only serving with his action. All of his other powers are not being used to serve Hashem. He's only using he's only serving Hashem with his action. His mind is not there. His heart is not there. He's just doing action because he's afraid of his master. That is the level of Eved Knani. Then there's a higher level. The higher level is a Eved Ivri. It's a servant, a slave who's Jewish. And okay, I just want to, okay, a slave. And what is his avodah? He serves Hashem with passion. He does mitzvahs. He's excited to do mitzvahs. He is using his emotions. He is using his emotions to serve Hashem. The only downside of the Eved Ivri is that he doesn't have complete bittul. His bittul could be lacking, because as soon as he says, I enjoy, I appreciate Hashem, I love to do mitzvahs, is his identity is very much there, alive and well. So the advantage of the Eved Knani, the advantage of the non-Jewish slave is that he has complete bittul. The disadvantage is that he's only using his actions. The Eved Ivri, the Jewish slave, the advantage is that he's not just serving Hashem with action, but he's serving Hashem with all of his power. He's serving Hashem with all of his midas. He refines his midas. He uses his midas to serve Hashem, but the downside is that the bittul might not be complete because he very much feels his identity. This very much fits like a puzzle with what we said before, because the Eved Knani, the non-Jewish slave, says that you're supposed to inherit the slaves from one generation to the next. That means the Eved Knani, under regular circumstances, is never let go, is never freed. If he has children, those children are automatically slaves, and they don't have the opportunity to be free unless there are other circumstances. If there's a circumstances that for a mitzvah, then the Eved Knani could be freed. There are two examples. Two examples are that, for example, if there's 9 men for a minyan and you need a 10th man, you need a 10th man to daven, and there's no one else, then there is a opinion that Eved Knani could be let go, so that he could, then somehow, I don't know if we could convert on the spot, but somehow he could be able to not be let go, and then he could be part of the minyan if he becomes Jewish. I don't know exactly all the details of that. And another example is if a person wants his Eved Knani to marry his daughter, then he could be let go, and his status of Eved, he could be let go, and he's not an Eved Knani anymore, to marry a Jewish girl. Again, you would need conversion there. I don't know exactly how that works, but generally speaking, the Eved Knani is a servant forever, and that very much fits with this concept of. Okay, just give me 1 second because I want to plug in. 1 second, please. I apologize. I was just losing battery. Okay, the Eved Knani represents bittul, and bittul is something that we always need. We always need it. So the Eved Knani is never is never let go, because bittul is something that we always need. We never graduate the concept of having bittul to Hashem, and therefore Eved Knani is never let go and never receives Hanaka, doesn't receive any kind of parting gifts, because he never leaves, and that represents bittul, which we always have to have no matter what. And the Eved Ivri is let go after 6 years and does get Ha'anaka. The Eved Ivri is a person who worked on his midas. He worked on his midas for 6 years, or for 6 millennia, because the 6 years represent the 6,000 years of Galus as well, which we're going to see in a minute. And after working on his midas for so long, he is set free, meaning that he rises to a higher level, and he does get Ha'anaka, he does get parting gifts, because he left this level and he ascends to a higher level. And what is the gifts that he gets? He gets Chachma and Bina. Those are his gifts, and the Chachma and Bina permeates his entire life. That's the gift, that's the Hanaka that Eved Ivri gets. So practically what that means, practically what's our Avodah, practically what's demanded of us is to have both, to have the advantage of the Eved Knani, to have the bittul, and at the same time to be a Eved Ivri, which is to serve Hashem with passion and with excitement, and to use the advantage of the Eved Knani, to have the bittul as well, not to just feel me and my identity, and then then we will be freed, and we will achieve even a higher level when we have Chachma, when we are given Chachma and Bina to penetrate and permeate our lives. So just an example of what this means, because usually we see in Tanya that usually the Chachma and Bina, they're the ones that give birth to the Midas. So what does this mean? So Chachma and Bina, yes, they do give birth to the Midas, but that is only step 2. Step 1 is that we are born with Midas. We are born with emotion. Midas means emotion. So we're born with emotion. And what happens is, growing up in a Jewish home, growing up in a Jewish environment, being educated in a Jewish way, we take children. So the children have emotion, and they also have something called, they do have wisdom, but the wisdom is in a very minute form. And what happens is, we train our children, we teach our children to love Yiddishkeit, to love doing mitzvahs, and they do the mitzvahs, and they do it with emotion, and they do it with passion, but they don't necessarily get it when they're young children. But when they grow older and they learn the depth of the mitzvahs, then they get Chachma and Bina, and then the Chachma and Bina penetrates their emotions, and then they could serve Hashem on a much greater greater level. So in the beginning, we start serving Hashem with emotion, with passion, but it's limited, because the emotion and the passion is only, it could only go so far, because we work on it with only a very low chachma de katnos, a very low measure, a very small measure of wisdom. But after we do as much as we can, and to work on our midas, then we get Ha'anaka, then we leave this level, we get a parting gift of Chachma and Bina, and then the Chachma and Bina shines and is revealed in our life, and penetrates and permeates us, and then we're able to serve Hashem, and to have the passion that we have then is on a whole new level. I'll just give an example. From my younger years to explain what this means practically. So when I was a kid, the highlight of my week, which I'm sure the highlight of many children's week, is Friday night, the Shabbos meal. And my most favorite thing to do was to sing with my father. the Shabbos Zmires, and there's certain, certain songs that were in our family that we would sing that were very beloved to me, and I loved singing with my father. And that was what made, the Friday night meal so special. But then as I grew older, and there were guests that came for Shabbos, and if the guests were male, then of course I couldn't sing. And then I felt, I didn't have the same enjoyment for Shabbos at that point. I would sing with my father, Shalom Aleichem, Eshes Chayil, and then the guests would come in, and I'd be, for you, at least I got to sing something. But obviously that is a very, very limited slave-like mentality, stuckness that I had as a child. Yes, I had passion and love for Shabbos, but it was very limiting and a slave-like perspective that I could only enjoy Shabbos if I could sing with my father. But the second that wasn't an option, then all of a sudden the passion kind of dwindled. But then when I got older, and I appreciated Shabbos, that Shabbos is not just about, having the opportunity to sing with my father, but there's so many other incredible things about Shabbos. Then your appreciation for Shabbos grows infinitely after you learn about it, and after you grow older and become smarter and understand things from a whole different perspective. So this is what it means, that when we're younger, we could have, younger in years. It could be physical years, it could be not physical years. When we start off our service of Hashem, so we're very much in a slave-like mentality that it's very limited. We're limited, but then after 6 years, or after we complete this Avaida, then we graduate to a higher level where we have the revelation of Chachma and Bina, where we understand Hashem and appreciate Hashem on a whole different level, and then that in turn creates a new set of midas, and then we could serve Hashem in a much infinitely greater way. And just like the six years that the slave works for his master represents the 6 days of the week, and the seventh day when he is set free, that is represented by Shabbos, as well as the 6 days of the 6 years that the slave works represents the 6 millennia of Galus, and then the 7th year when he's set free represents Mashiach. So just like on Friday before Shabbos, we taste all the food of Shabbos. We have a taste of all the food that we're going to enjoy on Shabbos. So too, as we are, since we're approaching since we're nearing the end of the 6,000 years of Galus, and we're like Friday, very close to Shabbos in history, in the Jewish history. So since we're so close to the time of Mashiach, our wish, our request is that we're ready now. We should already begin to experience the Hanaka, the gifts that we will fully receive when we are fully freed from this galus. So I'm just gonna finish. I'm just gonna catch up with the poem. Okay, to serve Hashem, there are 2 ways. The Eved Knani serves Hashem with bittul all his days. He forces himself to do what is right. His identity is not in sight. So if you want to look at this Eved Knani, and also there's something very special. There's something very special to the Eved Knani, and that is that even if he doesn't feel like it, even if he doesn't want it, you see his core. You see his core that he'll do it anyway, because at his core he is one with Hashem, and therefore he serves him, even if he forces himself to serve Hashem, because that is truly his core and his identity. That even though he doesn't let his outer the Eved Knani, it's not about him. He's completely batal to Hashem. But this complete bittul is a very important thing. And it shows when a person is completely batal to Hashem, it shows that he's truly connected to Hashem at his core. The Eved Ivri serves Hashem with pleasure. It doesn't just affect his behavior. The advantage of the Eved Ivri is that not only is his action, we have thought, speech, and action, not only is his action and his thoughts and his speech on what's on the outside is being used to serve Hashem, but his entire being, his midas, all of his powers, he's using for Hashem. With his emotions, he is serving, but his bittul, he is lacking. So therefore, the goal has to be a combination of both. The Eved Kanani usually isn't set free because bittul we need constantly. After 6 years, the Eved Ivri is set free and gets ha'anaka, which is the revelation of Chachma and Bina that permeates his avodah. To the galus so hard, the 6 years compare. The 7th compares to the geula, which is so near. Just like on the 6th day, we taste from every Shabbos dish. To start getting a taste of our ha'anaka, today is our wish. Okay, so this is basically the class. If anyone wants to chime in or ask any questions, feel free. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Hani. Thank you for your dedication. It was a pleasure hearing you. Missing you in person, but I'm happy you have a little vacation. Take care, everybody.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Okay, take care. Thank you all for joining, even though the kids are home. Have a great week, and Rest Hashem, looking forward to seeing you next week. Take care.